Welcome to a new recap video. Remember to like and subscribe. As the duel begins, the prince is shocked to see that Martha is overpowering Tars, who's actually the bigger and seemingly stronger knight in training. He watches the black-haired girl in awe as she attacks the Orwyn knight with a confident smile. Overall, the swordsmen of the second training hall proved that they were definitely stronger, and they lived up to the Zighart name, because they were clearly on par with the kingdom's knights in terms of skill. On the other hand, the trainees from the 6th training hall turned out to be rather disappointing with their skills. Even though they were well trained, they were still inferior in skill compared to the Robert family's knights in training. However, the prince couldn't help but admit that the 6th training hall is still where the most talented trainees were, especially after seeing Martha's brave and epic display of incredible swordsmanship. From a distance, we see the Orwyn Kingdom's duke speaking with the red-haired instructor. He asks Lemmer if this is the reason he came out of nowhere to suggest a visit to the 5th training hall. In response, the elf claims that it's a rare opportunity to be able to duel against one of the 6 Emperor's knights in training, and then reveals that he suggested the matchup because he thought it would teach his students a lesson. The visitor is surprised to hear this statement, and admits that he can't believe those words just came from the person who used to be called the Brilliant Sword. Hearing this, Lemmer just teases him, asking if he should act the way he used to back in the old days. He even suggests that they make a bet, at which the Duke confirms that the elf's betting tendencies are still very much a part of him. Interested in the offer, he asks the elf what the terms of the bet are, so he responds, saying that they should have 20 duels in total and then reward the winner. Lemmer believes that it would be a lot more fun if they wagered on the duels instead of just watching the matches, but the guard captain finds his suggestions overly confident. He reminds the Duke that his knights were given training in Orwyn, so he asks him if he's really sure that his trainees in the training hall can beat them. This question just causes Lemmer to burst into laughter, before telling the visitor that he has way too much faith in his trainees. The elf admits that he too has great faith in his students, implying that he's very sure they can defeat the visitors. The scene shifts back to the fight, where we catch up with Martha, who's still giving Tars a horrible time in their matchup. She lands a powerful sword slash, which he manages to block, but the impact is so great that it pushes his feet into the wooden floor. Immediately in the next second, the force of her attack shatters his sword, and as a wave of horror washes over his face, he starts to ask himself how the girl could be so strong. The guy is sweating at this point because of how terrified he is, but Martha doesn't even care that he's now defenseless. She just follows up with another powerful hit to the gut, which should ordinarily be enough for Tars to start coughing out blood. Even though he's wearing metal armor, the hit is still so strong that it forces him to his knees. As such, Martha is announced as the winner of the honestly one-sided duel. Our boy watches the whole thing feeling dazed, and admits that he thought she would be softer in her swordsmanship after fighting against him. He's completely taken aback by the fact that she has even increased her speed and power instead. After the massive win, Martha sheathes her sword, and with a smug look on her face, she asks her defeated opponent why he would depend on his strength so much, when he didn't even put everything into his first attack. This dark-haired girl with no chills even calls him an idiot for making that costly mistake against her. Seeing her confidence and increased strength, Ron admits that he finds it pretty amusing, but Wrath instantly chimes in claiming that there's nothing amusing about watching these little ants fight. The grumpy blue creature claims that all the duels are even boring to him, but our blonde hero just responds, reminding him that not all ants are young. Wrath just scoffs when he hears this, and begins to brag about his exploits back when he was in the demon realm. He claims that back then it was more entertaining to him when he pitched younger demons to fight against each other. However, before he can finish bragging, Rayon just smashed him back into vanishing. Our boy is having fun, so he just wants the blue guy to shut it for now. Not long after that, we see that it's time for the next duel between the trainees and the visitors from the Orwyn Kingdom. It's the 18th match, and this time it's between Lunan and another knight in training, named Idalia. Once the announcement is made, Rayon prompts Lunan to step forward for her fight, and the white-haired lady timidly walks her way into the arena. Standing face-to-face with her opponent, we see that the redhead appears to be a lot more confident in the fight. Idalia sees Lunan coming to meet her and tells her that she doesn't like the spaced outlook in her eyes. Apparently, it annoys her, so her confident demeanor quickly changes into an angry mood as she activates her powers. Huge flames appear all around the redhead, and when Lunan sees this, she quickly retorts that she doesn't like fire either, especially since she has the power of ice. The white-haired knight in training grips her sword tightly and activates her own power as well, which causes cold, icy chills to fill the air and surround her. Even though it doesn't show on her face, Lunan immediately assumes a more confident stance in preparation for the duel. And the next thing we see is the two girls clashing swords. Idalia seems to be more ferocious in her attack, while Lunan tries her best to remain focused. As the fight goes on, a huge cloud of steam erupts, and the other trainees just watch anxiously, not sure what's going on. Inside the smoke and mist, the redhead seems to be lost as she can no longer find her opponent, and while she's still standing confused, Lunan sneaks up behind her from within the dust and fog. Idalia instantly senses the sword attack coming from behind her, so she quickly turns around to land a powerful slash of her own. Unfortunately, she misses the shot, and Lunan disappears into the dust once again. At this point, the redhead is even more perplexed, but then she quickly concludes that it must have been an illusion. She's still trying to process the entire thing when the white-haired knight in training sends chills down her spine by placing the cold edge of her sword on the visitor's neck. Idalia is bewildered by this sudden turn of events, and as she stands in that vulnerable position, Lunan is declared the winner of the 18th match. After the announcement, the calculative knight in training starts walking away, so Idalia calls out to her, admitting that it was a good fight, even though she lost. But she suddenly stops talking when she sees that Lunan isn't even listening to her. The winner walks straight to Rayon to ask him if he watched her fight, like a student seeking for validation. Thankfully, the blonde hero commends her for improving on her footwork and the victory overall. Even though Ron tells her she did a good job, she doesn't seem to be proud of herself. She just sits on the floor like she's the one who lost, and our boy is pretty confused by this. Meanwhile, Lemur is having a kick out of the results he's seen so far. Since the little tournament started, his students have had 9 wins and 9 losses, which means that they're currently tied with the visitors on the number of wins. So he jokes about it, suggesting that things are getting pretty heated for the two sides. Regardless, it doesn't make him any less excited to announce that it's time for the 19th round of the day. This time, Burin is called up to face off against the next opponent from Orwin, Sauron. The two swordsmen take equally confident stances as they stare each other down before their fight. The visitor introduces himself first, revealing that he's Sauron Quesel, a knight in training. And that's when Burin Zegart does the same, introducing himself as a trainee. While the two are exchanging pleasantries, Rayon takes a closer look at Sauron and claims that he looks pretty strong. This worries him, because he feels that Sauron is the strongest visitor after the third prince. But while he's getting worked up about it, the fight begins. As you'd expect, the two knights in training engage in a very heated duel. Burin attempts to land a low hit, while Sauron opts for an approach from above. Not surprisingly, they cancel each other out over and over, so Burin begins to realize that his opponent is very similar to him in skill. He starts to feel threatened, and fears that it will be over for him if he lets his guard down for even a second. Sauron launches at him to land another powerful blow, so the blue-haired swordsman knows that the guy must be thinking the same thing. The two guys are clearly evenly matched, but they're both aware of this, so neither of them holds back. Burin and Sauron go at it with all their might, and after a grueling duel, we see that there's no winner this time. Both fighters point their broken swords at each other, and they're panting heavily after such an intense fight. Meanwhile, the other trainees watching are astonished to see that Burin and Sauron somehow managed to break their swords. Seeing that this is the result of the 19th duel, the instructor confirms that the match has ended in a tie. After the announcement, a very pissed-off Burin just walks back. Still, Rayon commends him for doing a good job, claiming that Sauron was the strongest fighter out of all the Orwin knights in training so far. But of course, the grumpy blue-haired guy just storms past him, feeling very disappointed with his own performance. He claims that it doesn't matter how strong Sauron was, because he feels that he should have won at all costs, since he went out there to fight with the Zygarde name on the line. However, while he's beating himself up about it, the blonde swordsman just calms him down with a pat on the shoulder, telling him not to worry about it. Burin turns around wondering why he said that, but then our boy suddenly starts walking away, but not before vowing that he'll win the last fight for them. Rayon is very certain that he'll defeat the strongest Orwin knight in training, who is none other than the third prince, Grier to Orwin. So, with the determination and zeal to bring glory to his family name, he walks up to face his blue-caped opponent for the 20th round of the very intense tournament. The third prince sees our boy walking up toward him, and he starts to panic because he didn't expect that Rayon would be the trainee to fight against him. Using his power, he senses our hero's martial prowess and feels that it's way too ordinary. So he asks Rayon if he's even a direct bloodline descendant of the Zygarde family. In response, the hero just bluntly reveals that he isn't, so Grier to Orwin scoffs because he didn't expect to fight an obvious duel. From the tone of this voice and the look on his face, you can tell that he's underestimating our boy. This snobby prince even claims that he'd prefer to fight someone between Burin, Lunan, and Martha, then enter a meaningless duel with Rayon. He then calls out to instructor Lemur and claims that he has a suggestion for the fight. The red-haired elf asks Grier what he has in mind, so he points to Lunan and Martha, claiming that he doesn't think they're even tired after their own duels. So he asks the elf if he can fight them after beating Ron. I swear, this guy is overconfident for no reason. After hearing this very bold idea, Lemur gleefully accepts the proposal, reminding the prince that it's only going to happen if he defeats his current opponent. With the instructor's approval, Grier asks that the girls start getting ready for him right away, because he thinks his fight will be over too quickly. This dude is so confident that he's going to win, that he even decides he won't use his aura against Rayon, feeling that he wants to save his power for the girls. After making this decision, he unsheaths his sword, probably thinking that he's just going to casually defeat our boy in a few seconds. Rayon hears everything the third prince says, but he doesn't even respond to his insults. Instead, he chooses to do the talking with his sword, so he unsheaths his blade as well. Just as the fight is about to begin, Duke Tartan arrives at the scene and is horrified when he sees Rayon. He asks the instructor who the blonde monster is, and comments that he didn't even notice him before because of his inconspicuous presence. However, now that he sees him, he feels very disturbed by him. Lemur just responds by saying that the Duke isn't so blind after all, and asks him why he didn't warn the third prince if he knew about Rayon's strength. Tartan realizes that Grier thinks the blonde swordsman isn't skilled, and even though he would one day grow up to be the future of the Orwin kingdom, this blue-eyed prince still doesn't know the meaning of defeat. The Duke confesses that he felt it would be a good idea for the prince to learn what it feels like to lose in a safe environment. Regardless, he still feels that Grier is insanely strong, and he's confident that even the genius swordsman won't win against him. Lemur hears this and finds it amusing, so he just smiles once again, telling Tartan that he doesn't agree. Seeing that they're not on the same page about who would win this insanely hyped duel, the elf suggests that they make another bet. The Duke is taken aback by this and asks Lemur if he loves to gamble that much. However, the red-haired instructor assures him that it would be a simple bet on a few drinks, so Tartan agrees with him and asks what they're betting on. In response, Lemur just raises his hand, showing 5 fingers before making a very bold statement, claiming that Ron will end the third prince in just 5 attacks. At this point, it appears that the instructor is even more confident than Grier, who thinks he'll take our boy out very quickly. The fight starts strong, and the red-eyed swordsman charges at the prince with a powerful sword attack. The prince is taken by surprise with this, and his eyes widen in horror as he sees the person he underestimated, lunging at him with a fire tornado at his back. Even the Duke is stunned by this instant attack from Rayon, but before he or his champion can even think of a counterattack, the genius swordsman lands his first blow. With great force, speed, and precision, our boy hits Grier and his side, leaving him stunned for a while. The impact is so much that the prince even starts coughing blood, while wincing in pain before falling to his knees as if he's already lost. Seeing this, Raon assumes that the prince is already down, so he concludes that the fight is over and starts to cover his blade back. While he's doing that, Lemur starts laughing again, feeling that he overestimated the prince by thinking 5 attacks would be needed to knock him down. On the other hand, Duke Tartan just watches the whole thing with shock laced all over his face. The guy can't believe his eyes, and while he remains stunned, the prince starts to reflect on his earlier thinking. He admits that he judged incorrectly and finally starts to realize that Rayon was the last fighter for a reason. Well, of course, it's because he's the real deal, and Grier finally understands this as well. Meanwhile, the Duke tries to start an argument. Tartan finds it hard to believe that Rayon is just a trainee, because in his eyes, the blonde kid already has the footwork and swordsmanship of a trained knight. But Lemur doesn't give him any room to continue, explaining that it's the exact reason he said that Rayon would win. With the way things are looking, the instructor feels that his student has brought home the win already, so he tells the Duke that he'll make reservations at a nice and fancy place where they can have some drinks. But before he can finish talking, Grier interrupts him. The injured prince tells Rayon to stop when he tries to walk away. It turns out that he's not done fighting yet, and even when others try to explain that the fight is already over, he insists that he hasn't even shown his real skills. The third prince claims that the fight would have been very different if he had used his real powers at the start of the fight, and while he's being a sore loser, Martha cuts him off, insinuating that he's just a barking dog. She mocks Grier for refusing to admit his defeat and being so whiny when he's supposed to be a prince. She also uses the opportunity to take a jab at Byrne, who's still brooding on the sidelines after his tie against Saren. The prince is shocked to hear her talk to him like that, and he's evidently ashamed of himself. But before he can say another word, Martha just continues talking and informs him that she's actually trying her best to be nice to him at the moment. And after claiming that she's being polite, she yells at him to get the hell out of their training hall, reminding him that he already lost. After her not-so-subtle goodbye message, ideally it gets offended and yells at her to watch her mouth when she's talking to the prince. As you'd expect, Martha can't be less threatened by the redhead, so she just informs her that even though Grier is from the royal family, she's also a direct descendant of Sykart. As such, she feels that she doesn't have any reason to be polite to the crybaby prince. Seeing that the atmosphere is getting quite heated, Lumber decides to intervene. He tells the students that they've all said enough and suggests that they hear what Rayon has to say about the matter, and he's the one that will be fighting in the rematch after all. The elf informs Rayon that he can choose what he wants to do, so the young swordsman recalls that bets were placed on the fights. He also confirms that all the duels are over, which means that there is no reason to fight anymore. However, the third prince suddenly acknowledges that he lost. He admits that he didn't properly judge Rayon's strength and reveals that he underestimated him completely before the fight even started. Grier goes on to say that he feels very embarrassed and that he's so ashamed that he can't raise his chin. As such, he gets on his knee and drops his sword on the ground to beg our hero for one more fight, claiming that he would regret it forever if he leaves with such an embarrassing defeat. The prince then gets on his feet and bows to Rayon, pleading with him for a rematch. Seeing this, the blonde swordsman is taken aback because he didn't expect the boastful prince to even apologize or even put down his sword. He initially felt that Grier was just an arrogant brat, but now that he's seen the guy put his pride aside, he changes his mind and agrees to one last fight between them. The prince assures him that it will indeed be the last one, and as Rayon pulls out his sword for the second time, Grier reveals a gold pendant around his neck that has his family's crest imprinted on it. Feeling remorseful, he admits that he lost the first time because he was too arrogant to even recognize his opponent's strength. All of a sudden, he rips the necklace off his body and vows that he'll give his all in this second fight. The moment he does this, a powerful surge of energy surrounds his body, and he literally starts glowing with blue sparks of lightning. Our boy is stunned when he sees the insanely powerful aura coming off the prince's body, and Martha is just as shocked. At last, the prince was showing his true strength. The power seems so overwhelming that Tartan tries to discourage Grier from using the technique, but the prince just cuts him off, insisting that this isn't the time to be hiding his powers. Feeling very confident and driven for the rematch, he unsheaths his sword and makes it very clear to everyone that he wants to fight our hero with everything he's got. While Grier is charging himself up for what he believes will be an epic fight, Wrath reappears to our boy and calls the prince a stupid idiot. Not surprisingly, Rayon was also hiding his real powers the first time, but it seems that the prince doesn't know that. Our genius swordsman calmly assures his blue companion that he can beat Grier this time too. But Wrath points out that the opponent has a lot more aura, and is also stronger than Rayon this time around. Still, feeling confident that he can take the prince out 2 times in a row, Rayon asks Wrath if he's willing to make a bet on it. And of course, the hot-headed blue creature accepts the deal. With the both of them on the same page, a blue window appears, revealing the terms of their little wager. Wrath bets that if Rayon can win against the third prince of the Orwyn Kingdom, then all of his stats will be increased by 4 points. On the other hand, if our boy fails to defeat Grier, rage emotion will increase by a whopping 10 points, which means the blue fellow will have a lot more power in Ron's body. The genius swordsman accepts the conditions and takes a very strong battle stance to activate his aura, waiting for the prince to make his first move. Seeing this, Grier, who already has a point to prove, reveals that he'll start first. So without even wasting another second, he charges at the hero with his powerful aura engulfing him and his sword. The prince leaps into the air to land a powerful attack from above. But as you'd expect, Raon is up to the task, so he delivers a counterattack immediately. The two fighters clash swords in a heated aura-infused duel, which causes a huge blast that leaves everyone watching completely astonished. Inside the fight, Grier starts to panic, because even though he's giving everything he's got, Raon doesn't even seem to be affected by it. This makes him wonder if the red-eyed swordsman should even be called a genius, because he feels he's more like a monster. Desperate to win this rematch, the third prince decides to finally use all of the power he's been keeping aside. His sword starts to glow even brighter this time, and when Raon sees this, he concludes that Grier must be using the peer's sword technique, which is only passed down to the successors of the Orwyn kingdom. Looking at the opponent's energy, it's easy to guess that he's planning to end the duel in a single strike. So of course our hero braces himself and tells Grier to come at him with everything he's got, while also taking a stance to counter the attack. The prince sees that Raon knows what he's planning to do, so he reveals that he's putting everything on the line with his next move, and then tells the genius swordsman that he should get ready for impact. Looks like an epic clash is about to go down, but the latest chapter unfortunately ends here, leaving us again with an awkward cliffhanger. I'm quite sure that Raon would come out on top in the end, but I'm curious to know how the prince will react to his second defeat in a row. More importantly, how will the patriarch reevaluate his child's worth when he comes to hear about this news? That's all for now. Remember to like and subscribe. See you tomorrow.